Hafa day, everyone. Welcome to the Guam Congress Building. This roundtable hearing by the Committee on Maritime and Air Transportation, Parks, Tourism, Higher Education, and the Advancement of Women, Youth, and Senior Citizens is hereby called to order. Today is Friday, April 14th, 2023, and the time now is 2:40 p.m. For the record and in accordance with open government law, notices for this hearing were sent on April 7th and again on April 12th. This hearing is also published on the Guam Legislature's website and the Guam Public Notice website. I'd like to thank my colleagues for joining me today, the Vice Chair of the Committee, Jesse Lujan, Senator Jesse Lujan, and Senator Telos Haidegui. Thank you, colleagues. And we are here for a roundtable discussion, so we have stakeholders from the industry as well as our GVB board members and GVB management, and I will allow all of you to go around the table to introduce yourselves and state your title for the record. We'll begin with Mr. Chair of the GVB board.
My name is George Chu, and I'm the current chairman of the Guam Visitors Bureau.
I'm Carl Gutierrez, and I'm the general manager of the Guam Visitors Bureau.
Joseph McDonald, attorney for GVB.
Jerry Perez, Vice President of GVB.
Thanks. Jeff Jones, Board of Directors, GVB.
Ho Eun, GVB board member.
Good afternoon. My name is Monty Mesa with the GVB board, new elected member.
Hafa day, everybody. My name is Dave Tidinko. I'm just representing our chairperson, Jovina Lujan, from our organization, GTTA. She apologizes for not being able to make it this afternoon.
Hafa day, Chair. My name is Bill Nald, and I'm also representing the Guam Travel and Tourism Association. I am the Vice Chair.
Hafa day, Mary Rhodes, President for Guam Hotel Restaurant Association and board member of the Guam Visitors Bureau.
All right, thank you very much for joining us today. Here are some rules of conduct before you proceed with today's roundtable hearing. The conduct of this hearing shall be as follows. Written comments or presentations shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide the legislative staff with your copy for photocopying, and comments may be read, and we ask that any lengthy presentation be summarized to 5 minutes. Once you are done, please remain in the room for questions or additional discussion or comments. Questions and comments shall be confined to the nature and agenda of this roundtable hearing. The agenda for today concerns the reconciliation of GVB's Enabling Act and agency bylaws. The chair will invite individuals who have signed up to provide comments. Before speaking, individuals who wish to make a presentation shall first be recognized by the chair and again state your name for the record. The order of questioning will be with the panel of senators first, but this is really a free and open discussion as a roundtable hearing. We just ask that you be courteous of everyone who's here, don't speak over each other, and please be recognized by the chair first. Personal inference about the character or motive of any senator or any individual in this meeting is not permitted. Any violations of this rule of conduct will result in removal from the room. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and may be asked to leave. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced at all times. As the committee chair, it is my expectation that everything we do here today and moving forward is with the mission of the Guam Visitors Bureau uppermost in mind. At its most basic, the mission of GVB is to effectively and efficiently promote and develop Guam as a safe and satisfying destination for visitors to derive maximum benefits of tourism activity for the people of Guam. I think we can all agree on the basic mission statement and that we are all committed to it. Yes? Everyone? Yes. Okay. So I look forward to honoring the GVB mission and our commitment to it through this process. Moving right along, this is meant to result in an update and reconciliation of both GVB's enabling laws and operational bylaws so they are in sync with current and evolving 21st century best practices. We will receive concrete recommendations from GVB and industry representatives, ensuring long-awaited and substantive policy changes are presented to the full legislature. I believe there is near universal agreement of the wisdom of doing so, and the generation of leaders who gave us the Guam Visitors Bureau could never have imagined what tourism would look like 53 years later. We owe it to them and the vision they had for Guam more than 50 years ago to ensure that GVB policies are consistent with government regulations and industry best practices. Indeed, we probably should have been doing so on an ongoing basis, perhaps every 10 years, since GVB was created in the 1970s. With that, the work before us today and in the weeks and months ahead must focus on strengthening tourism, particularly at a time when Guam should be exploring every opportunity to stand apart from other destinations. So now I'd like to give this time to our GVB representatives, to Mr. Chair or Mr. President of the Bureau, to give us, a few days ago, there was mention of an analysis between the enabling legislation and the bylaws done by the Guam Visitors Bureau. If we can speak on that first, or if you'd like to do a presentation.
Actually, Madam Chairwoman and Vice Chairperson, Senator Lujan and Senator Tadegui, I'd just like to, if I have your permission, to just make a brief remark.
Yes, please, go ahead.
We're here today to talk about the enabling legislation and changes to it. But I think before we go and talk about the changes to it, I'd just like to go over the history of it first, on how it came about, because I think it's really important that we know how things came about and then how we're going to change it. And it was through our esteemed former governor's foresight that the enabling legislation came about when it first came about, and it was drafted by Attorney Randy Cunliffe. I think he was the GVB attorney for 16 years. So I think it's very, very important now that we recognize that there are going to be changes that have to be made, but we have no one better here to understand what was the reasoning behind some of the things that were done back when the first was made, the enabling legislation was done, and now we're going to make changes moving forward. So I think it's really important that we understand that people had our former governor, current president, had the foresight to come up with this enabling legislation. And as you have mentioned, times have changed, and I look forward to working with our former governor here and our current president to make the changes that will make GVB better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Well, first of all, I think there's been so many iterations. There have been so well, 50 years ago, George?
I think, I don't know how many, but
No, but there's been so many iterations. I think at that time, the Guam Visitors Bureau was formulated to deal with those at that time. And as a matter of fact, it was your dad, Jeff, that came in there and gave us a lot of the input that we needed to be able to move forward a lot of the what's in the enabling legislation and some amendments to it. I'm not sure what's there now, but we've had our legal counsel review, because the situation is not necessarily the Enabling Act, but juxtaposed by the rules and regulations that may be problematic in governing GVB. But I believe that in one fell swoop, we can redo the entire GVB Enabling Act, and then from that comes the rules and regulations. In the interim, I think it's going to take us a while to probably redo the Enabling Act, but in the interim, we can amend the present bylaws, the second amended bylaws, to be congruent with the Enabling Act right now, because to change the Enabling Act right now, piecemeal, I think it would be more problematic. I think there should be just one introduction of a rewrite of the Enabling Act that GVB should operate under, and then from that, you'll get the rules, the bylaws, rules and regulations. So with that, I'm not sure exactly what he can come up and tell us right now what the problem is between the two, and I think that's where it should be. Take a look at the third Enabling Act and see whether it should be accepted to replace the second amended bylaws, and have it move forward until we find one piece of legislation that rewrites the entire Guam Visitors Bureau Act.
Yes, thank you so
Madam
much,
Chair?
Mr. President. One moment, Senator Titleigh. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And that is the hope that what we will accomplish here today and in the coming months. I don't think this will be the only roundtable that we have. We might do this several times before we get to a rewrite of the enabling legislation, but we are well on our way today, I think. Okay? Yes, Senator Titleigh.
Madam Chair, you know, I'm under the impression that, of course, like you mentioned, the enabling legislation is done by law. It's law, Guam Code annotated, versus the bylaws, which are created by the board. So if we are going to make adjustments to have that, you know, fusing together, making sure there's no discrepancies from one to the other, I would assume that we're here to change the bylaws because that's a lot easier than it is to change the enabling legislation. And let me give you an example. If a bill should come up in about a month, right? I know that's what he mentioned, but Chairman Chu said something different. He was talking about the changing the enabling legislation when he was talking, but you know, our president or GM was saying something different. And I just wanted to make sure because in a month from now, we can have another bill that comes out that speaks on about GVB and changing some rules there or bylaws. And once it comes into play, then I think, then again, the bylaws would have to be changed to meet the guidelines of the enabling legislation because that trumps over anything. So I just wanted to try and figure out where are we going here? Are we changing the bylaws to match the enabling legislation or vice versa?
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Titleigh. Point taken. As you know, we in the Guam legislature cannot vote on the bylaws of the Guam Visitors Bureau. It'll be up to the board before us. But we're here to listen, to gather information from these folks to see what is the best path forward for changes, of course, to the enabling legislation, which was written decades ago. So if there are changes to be made, I'm sure we're going to hear that here. To both, Senator, to both. Okay, thank you. Yes, Mary.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's correct. I think that the situation at hand, right, is it's been going back and forth regarding enabling legislation as well as the bylaws and understanding that it has been problematic in the last year. And I have been witness on several occasions at the membership meeting, both at GVB where it was done virtually, but I was present at the meeting in September, as well as the public hearing that was done here just recently. On several occasions, it was actually stated by the attorney as a recommendation, or at least cited that on several occasions that GVB should have, and I'm just suggesting this today, that if we were to correct this going forward, it would be much easier if we address the enabling legislation, primarily because Attorney McDonald has already cited examples, and he even read out the GITA as well as the KGTF enabling legislation that restores that, and I think that that would probably be best suited for the Guam Visitors Bureau so that we can move away from a lot of the issues that have been plaguing not only the board, but the membership and the activities that have happened, but also not happened at GVB in this last year. So I strongly suggest that we really look at the enabling legislation, as Attorney McDonald stated, with regards to GITA and KGTF as examples of that.
Thank you very much, Director Rhodes. I think that is a good segue for us to listen to Attorney McDonald and his analysis of both the bylaws and the enabling legislation to start the conversation.
Thank you, Senator Shelton, and thank you for the comments, Director Rhodes. So I alluded to this at the oversight hearing, which it kind of really depends on how the senators believe the mission is going to be carried out by GVB. And I had a rather long discussion over the weekend with with the general manager and as well as with Jerry. And to me, I think I've identified what I believe to be is the ultimate incongruence in the statute itself with the Enabling Act. And the way I can best describe it is this. If you look at the current structure of GVB, it is a nonprofit, non-stock membership corporation. And it's supposed to give out monetary handouts, that's in the statute, as well as grants, okay? However, everybody sitting around and trying to steer the industry wants to see not just a return to normal conditions, but actual growth. And so what you have in there is a mismatching of ideas, is the best way I can describe it. Because on the one hand, we're coming at it organically from a nonprofit perspective, but really what we want to do is make a lot of profit. And I think we need to embrace that. If that's the mission, we need to embrace that. And let's think about how we're going to turn it into a profit-making proposition as opposed to sort of hiding behind the nonprofit status, but trying to still foster growth. So to me, that is the legislative intent that needs to be clarified. And when I started to go through this exercise in my mind about what is really happening, really what you have is opposed missions. And what that implies is that you should have two sides of the house, or perhaps two agencies. One that actually carries out the mission, I call it the incubator and the driver, that carries out the mission of continuing to develop the tourism industry and to incentivize growth. Let's embrace it. Let's not hide behind it. But the other side is, why do they come to Guam in the first place? And this is what I call the incubator side, or excuse me, the curator side and the beautification side. We have to still curate the island. We still have to keep it beautiful. We have to develop actually the cultural attributes of it. And that actually, I think, is worthwhile of nonprofit grants and the like. As I continue to go through this exercise, and I'm doing this because I'm trying to help both the Bureau itself and the legislature to sort of make sure they come to grips with this. As I started to think about this, and I started to do some more thoughts, including with, sort of the problems that we've seen, one approach might be to actually either have two sides of the house in one agency or to have two separate agencies. But at the end of the day, sort of like what's happening and the way it's written in the Enabling Act now, it really goes to the beautification. Just take a look at the GVB, the purposes of the agency, and the purposes are, a lot of it is inward facing. It talks about developing employment. It talks about making sure that the island still, it looks beautiful and it's a nice place to be. It's very, very inward facing. On the other side, we have really the best and the brightest minds in the industry and across industries that are trying to do a very, very worthwhile mission, which is to grow our #1 industry. And they shouldn't be shackled to this nonprofit side. We should really hyper incentivize, is a good word I like to use. If we really want to do it, let's embrace it. So, an example, and this is just really a sort of a me talking out loud as I thought through this. You might think about the membership actually meaning something besides the vote in and of itself. In other words, one example I thought about of hyper incentivization would be to have members buy in, whether it be $100 or $1,000, whatever that is, and they get first dibs at organizing events, or they get first dibs at capital. And that goes into a lottery. And that lottery, whoever gets that, that's a member, now has actually an ability to raise money, right? You have something that some securities folks would say is an option. Okay, they can sell that to raise money for themselves to somebody who's actually going to organize an event that's going to, and here's the other thing, okay? If you're going to have a profit-making incentive as part of the Bureau, you need to make sure who's ever in there actually has skin in the game. Skin in the game. Because that's what really drives a successful outcome. And so with that one chance in a year through the lottery, you know, if it's Tunwan that ends up with an option, or if it's one of the larger corporation that ends up with an option, now what you have is not just capital, you have something that they can actually use to incentivize growth on a greater scale. And so I think as we think through this, and there's many thought exercises we can have on how we're going to, if you buy my premise. But I just challenge you to look at the way GVB is structured. And yes, we want growth. That's absolutely what we want. That's why we have the best and the brightest minds. But that is not always going to agree with the other side of the house, which is a nonprofit side of the house. And I think that's where we set up a lot of opportunities, but we also set up a lot of risks. If you look at what sometimes some of the flavors of law enforcement are nonprofits. They look at nonprofits and sort of so let's not, you know, if we're going to do it, let's stick to it. If we're not going to do it, let's figure out how else we're going to drive the industry. And, you know, I think I'm just going in circles at this point, so I'm happy to add other comments to this, but to me, that is the underlying incongruence, is the mission itself is a split mission, but we have, on the one side, we have business folks who know how to get this thing done and have some great ideas, but they're trying to do it through a nonprofit. Makes no sense. So I would say let's come to grips with what we're going to really do with the agency. And then if we're going to have just a curating agency that keeps the island beautiful, then fantastic. Otherwise, let's get our heads together and how can we incentivize and grow the industry.
I think legal counsel just made a really good point and pretty much just substantiated what Director Rhodes says, that there needs to be changes to the enabling legislation, right? I mean, that's pretty much what legal counsel. But I think before we even get into that, before we can change anything, we've got to ask ourselves a key question. What is the role of GVB, right? Which is what legal counsel just said. We need to identify what is the role of GVB. Then let's identify the problem areas. The voting is one problem area. Okay, there's a disparity in some of the votes. Okay, people are going to say, how do we rectify the voting? And then the selection of directors. How do we rectify that to make it different from the way it is, how it's done right now? Because there's some blowback on how directors are currently being done. All right. Now let's get past the board of directors. Once we get past that, we'll figure out one area. Number one, what's the role of GVB? Number two, how is the board of directors of GVB going to be chosen? Okay, I'm not going to tell you how to do it right now. This is just the topics I want to bring up. Number three, once we determine that there is a board of directors, what is the role of the board of directors? Okay, what is the function of the board of directors? Okay, and then we go from there. Because right now, if we go by the enabling legislation, you know, the board members, through the explanation of our esteemed governor, explained very clearly to me, I learned a lot from him in this short time, that we're not even allowed to talk to the employees, right? We have to do everything through resolution. So I know Governor Carl's tired of getting my messages. Simple things like confirming something, I'm asking him, he's acting like my secretary. because I have to go through him to get minor little things done at GVB. He's sick of me messaging him. Is that right? I mean, I know, but I mean, those are kind of things that makes it. We need to have an efficient board, okay? And the board has to be able to work together with the management to make GVB an efficient public corporation. So those are the key. I mean, maybe the other directors have other comments on what are the actual problems that we're facing that we need to address.
Mr. Chair, if I may real quick, you sat on Gita's board, correct? You've sat on Gita's board before, correct? Okay, and is there anything in that, in their bylaws or rules and regs for Gita that you're to speak directly to the director and not the employees?
It was there was no such rules. No.
There's no such rule.
But you know, normally board of directors don't tell any employee what to do.
Right, exactly.
We don't.
Right,
we
exactly.
don't do that. We don't overstep our bounds because we're there for a more strategic reason. We're not there to micromanage any company.
Okay.
That's not the board's job.
Okay,
We're not
thank
there
you.
for micromanaging and telling an employee do this, do that.
Okay, thank you.
We've got more important things to do with our volunteer time to be digging into the nitty-gritty details of the day-to-day operation. That's what the management's for.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I did spend quite a bit of time on the BRCC as it pertains to the bylaws and enabling legislation. And first of all, I say that Councilman McDonald, he did an excellent job of reconciling the enabling legislation with the old bylaws and then the new bylaws, proposed bylaws. However, that being said, after looking at that reconciliation, if you look at all the things that need to be done, I personally believe that we need to start off with a new enabling legislation. Start with a fresh sheet of paper and just ask ourselves, as Chairman Chu said, you know, what's the goal? What are we going to do? You know, start with the board. How's that going to be selected? I agree. The current way of electing the membership of the GVB directors, what do they call them, the member directors, is not fair. So we need to figure out how can we do that in a fair way so that all the members can participate. I think of the Guam Chamber of Commerce. They have a similar situation, but their votes are based upon their revenue, which determines their membership fee, right? But there's always one seat set aside for small business. So regardless of how many people are involved and how many directors you have, always one of them is going to represent small business. 2 seats, yeah. Well, we only have 4 on GVB, so you know, maybe 1 seat would be elected from the membership and 1 will be appointed from the government or something, you know. But there's a lot of things like that I think that need to be addressed. That voting is just one of them. From my discussions with the BRCC and with Ron Uggan, even the fact that the current legislation may be inorganic. There may be some parts of it that don't jive with the Organic Act. Like with the legislature appointing members. The governor, in his opinion, was supposed to appoint all the members and be confirmed by the legislature. So right now, the governor appoints so many members, the legislature appoints so many members, 1's appointed by the mayor's council, 4 are elected by the GVB, and so our question is that even organic? So there's a lot of things like that I think we need to dig into to figure out exactly, you know, what we want to accomplish. And then I think a lot of the problems in the past with the board and the management is that it wasn't clear which lane you're in and which lane you're supposed to stay in. And I think that has to be clearly defined. I think that the board cannot just be aspirational like it currently is set forth. There has to be skin in the game. I mean, all the members of the board, for the most part, are involved in the industry. They have a lot of real skin in the game because they have huge investments. So we have to be able to have input and have say-so and provide accountability on how the money is spent because it's our industries that are being affected. And if we do it properly, everybody benefits. So in closing, I'm just saying that I think we need to start with a clean sheet of paper, write a new enabling legislation, then write bylaws that, that are harmonized with that. So.
Yeah, the thing about it, Madam, it's on. It's on. Yeah, unfortunately, it's nice that maybe we can, as a group, this roundtable, come up with a proposed new GVB, for example. But ultimately, the people of Guam decide how we move forward with the Guam Visitors Bureau. We might just change the entire system because of the way it grew, to this point where we're bringing in close to $50 million from the Tourist Attraction Fund. Even that, when people complain about the Tourist Attraction Fund, the 11% that's there, they say, hey, that's our money. The businessman says, our hotel, we brought that in. A lot of the other taxes are brought in by Payless and other things, but that's not decided necessarily by the people that own the business where the funds came from. That belongs to the people of Guam. So whoever comes up with this piece of legislation ultimately goes out for a public hearing to the people of Guam. You don't know what's going to come out. You never know what's going to. It can't be just an ancestral kind of a drafting of legislation here to set up a new GVB amongst ourselves. It ain't going to happen. People out there have looked at GVB over the last several years, and they know now more about GVB than they did then when we were passing this enabling legislation 50 years ago. But it's up to the senators to decide to bring out to the public what do they want now in the visitor industry. Who owns the TAF? Why is it that we bring in $50 million and only get back $18 million from the TAF, while the rest go out to the various departments? We run the other agencies. That's the thing that we have to decide from the senators here. And I think through a public hearing, you won't be surprised what we're going to get back from the people of Guam when they come and testify. So, we can draft up some kind of legislation amongst ourselves, but you don't ever see what's going to happen when you go out to the public.
Absolutely, Mr. President. And this is an open discussion in a roundtable setting at this time before any legislation is drafted, but this forum is also open to the public. So we put it out. We know that these are the folks who have shown interest in the last several months, but in the coming roundtables, we invite the public, whether or not they have a stakeholder interest or just watching, as you said, people who have had formed an opinion about what GVB does and how the money should be used. We invite them to also join in this conversation.
Also, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Titagui.
One of the concerns I had during the oversight hearing was the liability issue with the board of directors. Not putting you in a position where you're liable. And I believe that your attorney mentioned something about being able to sign checks, or whether you are signing checks or putting your name to something that I don't think anybody in the board wants to be liable for anything. So is there, moving forward on what type of GVB this is that you were talking about earlier, what would protect the board from having any type of liability like that? What type would be the 501 or something that you mentioned earlier, or?
Before you answer that, I'd definitely like to see director's liability insurance.
Yeah. Well, if it's corrected in the enabling legislation to create it, then we don't need that, I mean, seriously, we won't need it.
There was, Senator, there was director's liability insurance for the board of GVB in the past.
There
For
was?
whatever reason, I don't know why it's gone now.
Okay.
But there was, right? I mean, Jerry will know. I only recently got involved with GVB, but I understood in the past there was director's liability insurance to protect the directors, and that's something that I would definitely like to see. That was one of the main reasons. Like I said, I wanted to see legal representation for the board, right? And on top of that, director's liability insurance, because we are just doing this really, tourism is for the people. Right. Without a tourism economy, the Guam, we can't rely on one. You always need diversification. We have the military, and now we need to have tourism to come back to where it was, so that we have a strong Guam economy. And when we have a strong Guam economy, everybody benefits. The
Yeah.
people benefits.
I just think that extra layer of liability that's, again, is important to not have that. But could I hear from the attorney on what type of nonprofit profit you were talking about earlier, and then during the oversight you mentioned a certain type of 510 or something, I can't even remember the number.
I mean, in the analysis, and it's in the analysis, what the board had tried to do was eliminate its liability by buying insurance, and then it lowered the standard of care that accrues to board members in government agencies. So when I looked at that, I said, I'm not sure we can do this unless, and you can't insure against criminal acts, obviously. So there's going to be limits to the liability coverage that you're going to get from D&O insurance. But really what it comes down to is, can you contract out risk when the statute says you have a certain standard of care by statute? And let's not forget, we're talking about public funds. So I think there is a way to do it. However, it's going to require some exceptions specifically, and I think it's going to be even more important if we're talking about dealing with nonprofits and making sure we comply with the 501c3 rules, right? And there's special rules there, not just from the GVB side, but also the nonprofit organizations that GVB will deal with. But if we're going to carry through, and I really do hope we carry through, because this is something I'm actually very, very interested in, and I don't have any interest, but at least as a legal exercise. If we're talking about actually using TAF to fund growth, okay, then you are going to definitely need insurance for the directors who are going to be in charge of developing products for the funding. And you want to have that level. Nobody should be looking over their shoulder is really what I'm saying, especially if we're going to incentivize growth. And what's really interesting, and here's another split personality. In private corporations, okay, you're actually allowed to vote for your interests. You're not allowed to do that in the government. So we have to take care of these fundamental issues, right? We have to, let's not pretend that this is not, let's just stare this, okay. If we're going to do funding and we've got the best and the brightest minds that are figuring out how to make the funding available, then let's make sure we take care so they don't look over their shoulders on any of this.
I think that it's a good idea to examine the purpose of GVB. If you're talking about funding new ventures, I mean, I think we have a government agency called GITA that can do that. And maybe it's a situation where GVB works with GITA, identifies incubator projects, helps GITA, maybe with a small business loan or something that GVB helps guarantee or something like that. So we don't get into the business that GITA's already in.
Right.
I mean, we don't need two GITAs.
Well, just to finish the discussion on this, of course, all economic activity, like anything else, it runs on a spectrum, right? So in between the incubator are promotions and events. And that's where the devil in the details is going to be the most important, because you're going to have small events where, no problem, 501c3 rules, all of that. But then you're going to have larger scale events, and we need the large scale events. When was the last time we had a nice big concert, right? That kind of stuff. That is not a GITA mission, but there's still an investment in an economic activity. Yeah.
I see that clearly as a GVB, because it's a promotion, it's a marketing campaign, if you will.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't see that being a question. I mean, GVB would do that now.
Well, what I'm saying is that the level of activity and the funding and who the funding goes to probably is not a grant, right?
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's where the devil in the details
But
is.
I think that you can bid those kind of things out to promoters.
Absolutely.
Right. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. Director Rhodes?
Yeah, so I just think that, again, rather than working backwards to try to fit the bylaws or the revised bylaws back into what is allowable with enabling legislation, again, I think we need to strongly consider just going the route of what GITA already has, as well as KGTF, because GITA, for example, in that same vein, they also give out grants. They've spent the last couple of years issuing grants to businesses that in different kinds of tiers, right? Whether it's forgivable loans or different kinds of structures, they have all of that, and it's allowable within GITA, and that's a government agency. So I agree with you that it has been problematic, the fact that there is this government entity, and trust me, learning in the board orientation with all of this stuff, that here we are as a government entity, but then yet we're a public corporation. So are we really subject to all the government requirements? And so I think therein lies the challenge, not just for us as board members or for management, but the entire industry. Because we cannot remain in a stagnant place any longer. And how long we stay here is only going to further define how we perform in the short and long term. And so I just think that we need to really face the fact that we've been ignoring that possibly we should just change the enabling legislation, and we have good examples in that. And with what Senator Titegree was saying is that there are other examples of this, from liability insurance to even waiver of liability to limited liability. There's so many things to learn from other agencies that have this. And with regards to GITA, again, they have that structure where they give out different kinds of programs, including grants and loans. And so there are a lot of things that we can learn from and not recreate the wheel and not overcomplicate matters. But it is a much better, cleaner solution to start that route, because the other thing that you're talking about is events and programs. Well, guess what? When GVB was created, we also didn't have, I don't know how many cultural agencies there are now, between CAHA, DCA. There's so many agencies that focus on the arts and the culture that we could really tap into for other types of programming. So I think that government is better suited now than it was 50, 60 years ago when GVB was first created. And that's an opportunity to maybe put some of those dollars into some of those agencies. And I know it's been an issue to try to combine some of those agencies in the past, but it's an opportunity for us to really put our heads together of what is the best way to move forward with GVB and meet the mission of the agency, knowing that there are other agencies out there, as Treasurer Secretary Jones said, is that there's already GITA that can focus on economic development and has that structure. There are arts and cultural agencies out there that we can work on for promotions and cultural events. So there are a lot of opportunities there, and I'm just saying that let's not overcomplicate it because we want to change the bylaws. I think that it's very clear here that the membership hasn't even had that opportunity to review it and change it, and we have an opportunity here to start fresh and recognize that it's very different 60 years later from when we first addressed this. And so, you know, Carl's correct. That was a long time ago, and we need to address the fact that we need to probably change the enabling legislation once and for all.
Senator.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Rhodes. Yes, Mr. Paris.
Yeah, I've just been listening, and I kind of like to double back into a number of issues that were raised during the discussion. And fundamental to this is really what Attorney Joe McDonald raised on the conflicting missions. One being destination-centered, and the other one being more marketing, privatized kind of centered. And I'm reminded actually that there is a model out there, whether we choose to follow it or not, the Hawaii model. You know, the Hawaii Tourism Authority, for example, is focused on cultural development, you know, all these different destination improvements and so forth, and improving the brand integrity of Hawaii. And then they contract out to a private party, like Tourism Hawaii Japan, Tourism Hawaii Korea. And these are the folks that are the private entrepreneurs, the businesses. They've got skin in the game, so to speak, and they coalesce to form a large organization using state funds that they get through grants, putting in their own money, and that's what drives the marketing. And then what they do is when they have really, really big events, then the state gets together with these folks and they create these huge events like conventions and so forth. But that's a model that might possibly address what you had indicated earlier about, the conflicting missions and staying in your lane, so to speak, because like it or not, the way the law is on Guam now, the elected directors and appointed directors, whatever their background is, are put in the position of having to deal with encumbrances of the government of Guam, whether it's open government law, whether it's the ethics commission or whatever. You're putting yourself in that position. Just wanted to throw that out, that there is a model out there if we want to take a look at that and see if it makes sense to, to fit in the discussion.
Yeah. Jerry, that Hawaii model, I know it worked for a long time, but now they're considering a merger now with, or some kind of incorporation with their economic development authority at this point. And the one thing that when we look, they're probably looking at what you guys are doing now, because the reason why they're wanting to do that, because their communities were hollering that they weren't being taken care of, and they weren't, destination or community oriented. So now that's their focus is that. So absolutely, when Attorney McDonald, you read the enabling legislation, it's basically local centric. But as you go on, it becomes business centric. And so there's a divide on that, and that's where I guess the conflict comes in. And then once you have that conflict coming in too, you also have how does the voting occur, and it's sounding like what's being said, and I may be wrong, and correct me if I am, but it's sounding like folks are wanting to change the voting mechanism, and maybe the one man, one vote should stand. Is that an agreement with everybody? So we can move on for that.
Something different than what we have. I'm not sure exactly what the best scenario is, but something.
Neither do I.
Yeah.
Also, Senator, I always hate it when we try to compare ourselves to Hawaii, because Hawaii has 11 million tourists.
Sure.
We have.
Sure.
We're still way behind, so we're not in the. I wish we could be in a position like Hawaii right now, and don't come to Hawaii. Well, that's
don't come. Yeah, you're right.
Give out in Guam.
That's exactly what they're saying.
Yeah.
Don't come right now.
We don't really want that, because Hong Kong had that same attitude too. Hong Kong at one point, they had like 42 million tourists, and it's like, we don't want any more tourists. I'm like, could you please send them to Guam?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Director Rhodes, and then President Gutierrez.
I just, the chairwoman, she did ask for all of us to agree on certain things, and I would like for all of us here at the table to understand that this is not business against locals. Please keep in mind the businesses here have been committed to the tourism industry and grew the tourism industry. They also have always employed local people, so all the employees are locals too, and we have, in our heyday, we're like 35–40% of the employees. And so you're ranging employees from as far north and as far south. And please keep that in mind, that we should not be saying locals versus business, because we are all locals too.
I don't think that's what we're saying. I think when you read the enabling legislation, it basically a strictly Guam promotions, getting people jobs and things of that nature. So it's not locals versus business. We're saying the legislation as written is very local centric. When it moves, as it goes on, it becomes more business minded in that sense. It's not it's just okay, so what do we do? What are we? Are we doing this? And then, as Attorney McDonald is saying, there are two different entities here. One could be a nonprofit, and then the other should be really profit-making, because that's how it evolves in the enabling legislation. It's how it involves. So Director Rhodes, we're not pitting one. We're just reading what the enabling legislation is saying. And so, yeah, how do we reconcile these two? Because the enabling legislation is schizophrenic at this point.
Can I think, I know that, I look at my little niece over there, and she's, obviously she's never been a senator in here. It's easy. We cannot just change something here that, change the law first. I think what we can do is either we continue with the second amended bylaws, which has some incongruities. We can work around it, or get a third amended bylaws where we know where our place at. Because for us to change the enabling legislation, believe me, it ain't that easy. It's going to take a couple of years maybe to get it going. It's better to figure out how to work with the enabling legislation now, maybe a few tweaks here for easy working with the third amended bylaws, but you can leave it alone. You have your second amended bylaws, you know what you can't do or what you can do, but it's going to move forward. You just can't change the enabling legislation that easy. There's so many people out there that think differently on how GVB should be. Some of them are saying, just give it to the governor. Let her handle it. Make it a regular department. We're at the point right now they're going to appoint all of these people from the governor's office. You guys run GVB and keep us out. Yeah. It's at that point. In the beginning, they needed your father. They needed, I don't know who else out there that are in the industry that know how to make it work. We did not. That is why it's shaped that way, where we put this, this hybrid kind of a board, so that you get the best minds in there to help the grassroots come in there and move that forward. But as of right now, the governor could say, I can put the right guys in there. All of you guys go run GVB, and you report to me, and that's it. It could be that way. We don't have to have this hybrid or go and elect and have a membership group. Just have the governor say, I appoint you, and this is a regular agency out of the governor's office. And it could work that way. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that the governor will probably say, yeah, let's do it that way. But don't think that we can just do a piece of legislation makeover right now. I think the best way is either accept the second amended bylaws as is, or change it to the third amended bylaws where it would work a lot easier. Right now, you know exactly what the incongruencies are, and you might avoid it.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. It's a long process, mm-hmm. And I think that we have to have a working relationship while we're deciding if we are going to change the enabling legislation. Like you said, it could be, a year, 2 years, 3 years, who knows how long. We need a roadmap in the meantime, and I don't really have a problem with the third amended bylaws, except for I think honestly, council, when there was a gray area, council tended to side with management rather than the board, in my opinion. Of course, I'm on the board and they're on management. But in some areas where it didn't speak to it, I felt that the council was trying to put more power with management than with the board. And especially when it comes to the budget. Like currently the way the third amended bylaws are written, we don't even approve the budget. It's presented to the board, but if we don't like it, it doesn't matter. Management can just take it right to the legislature or to the governor and bring it, and ultimately the legislature approves it. So, I think that honestly, like that part, the board should have to approve the budget because it's going to come here and the legislature is going to ask the board, what does the board think? Oh, they didn't approve it. Well, why? We have to have, I think, a unified front when we're coming before the legislature with a $29 million budget. We all have to agree on it.
Yes.
Sure.
And I just want to clarify that because I agree, and that some of the advice that was coming out, and without getting too into the weeds, it's all contextual, right? When you look at the way that the Enabling Act is set up, really, they wanted the the legislature wanted the board to take one more step to actually have control over powers, and that is to pass regulations. We skipped over all of that, and we just started to act like the board could actually do these things. If you look at the analysis, and it's in the bylaws, every jurisdiction that falls within the board we can see is out there in the Enabling Act. So when you look at that and you look at the duties that are and authorities that are given to the board, this is why there's a perception that they only have so much power. It's because the legislature still intended that, yes, let's give it to the board, but they need to pass regulations. And that's the issue, right, is that everybody in private industry knows that the board ultimately controls. Everyone who's had any experience in a corporation knows that. But we don't have that at GVB. What we have is language that says day-to-day, strategy, execution, employees, right? All of that falls under the general manager. But the board still wants to get certain things done through the general manager. Now, if you have a weak general manager, of course, the tendency is the board is going to start to take control over that. But if you have a strong general manager, then the management is really through metrics, right? It's through performance metrics. And just this thing about the budget, and it looks weird. Absolutely, it looks weird that the board, the way it's written, is going to have a say only. But let's not forget, this goes in front of the legislature. It goes in front of the governor. So it almost doesn't, yes, there needs to be a united front. There absolutely needs to be a united front. And then this becomes the greater question. Are the metrics within or without the jurisdiction of the board? And if you actually look at the language of the budget provision of it, it just says submit, and it doesn't say, and you know, if you're going to be a technical legal guy, you're going to say, well, there's other portions of the Enabling Act that says for board approval, prior board approval. That is missing from the budgetary provision of it. The only thing it says is prior to disbursement. Well, prior to disbursement is really under the control of DOA, right? So there actually, if you think about it, what needs to happen under that situation is that the board actually has to prove prior to DOA's release of the funds. But that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in the execution part because it goes through the general manager. So there's these very subtle, we've just taken it for granted, but they're traps. They're absolute traps because the jurisdiction is so circumscribed, the duties are so circumscribed, but the mission in business folks' minds is this thing needs to grow. This thing needs to be run like a machine. And we had that discussion yesterday about the Alan Searle recommendations for salary. I see the tension. I used to be in a big corporation. I see the tension, right? Which is, no, we need to keep this down. But everybody's saying, wait a minute, I'm a civil servant. I have the rights that everybody else has as civil servants. So this is why I'm saying the mission, let's embrace it. If it's profit, let's embrace it. Keep expenses down, bring yield up, hockey stick effect, all of that stuff. But if it's really island-centric, let's make sure that it's island-centric. And that's where I think some of even the incongruencies that we're talking about as the board's outlook, and not this board or any board, I'm just talking about in general, the board wants to grow. And absolutely, we need to grow. And we got to grow in an organized way. But the first thing, and I keep hearing the question, and I don't get it. Yes, it's a government agency at the end of the day. The administrative laws apply, unless there's a specific exception in the Enabling Act or one of the administrative laws. And the chairman and I even had a side discussion that I shared with the board yesterday at the meeting. Even the simple exercise of getting Mr. Ho and Director Jones together in front of the visiting Korean dignitaries or industry officials, under the interpretation of the open government law, the two of them get together talking about business, guess what? That's a meeting, guys. And you know, folks that have gotten in this trap says, well, we didn't make any action. We didn't do any voting. That's not the point. If you actually look at the open government law, it says any deliberation or discussion towards a decision also counts as a meeting. So these are the things that we just have to make sure we look at it and we have an honest conversation, senators. These guys, and Chairman Morinaga even said something very insightful that I'm sure you guys face. Look, there's some proprietary things that are going on with our industry and what we're expecting and how the capital outlay is going to happen for the next 12 months. Why should that be? Why should that proprietary information be in the public domain? I absolutely agree. That withers at your competitive advantage, right? But the problem is you stuck it in a government agency where we have the open government law, where we have the Freedom of Information Act. So how do you reconcile that? This is the challenge. So maybe we look at this as a 2 or 3 step process. When I had prior discussions with management on what was going on, and we looked at the Enabling Act and we saw the incongruities, what I said was, okay, if I'm a corporate lawyer, this is really a sort of a reorganization event, right? And when you have a reorganization event, really there's more thought that goes into what is going to happen. So I'm talking a little bit too much, but I just want to clarify that. It really comes down to because the Enabling Act does put so much authority under the general manager.
Yeah, I agree. Even the pay raises, you know, I mean, all the government in Guam has got pay raises, and GVB should be the same. But the way we learned about it was at the board meeting, we were told that they got pay raises. And it was no discussion like, this is what we're planning to do, this is why we're doing it. It was just, this is it. And the board should have more involvement, at least in some discussion. Not that we're going to agree or disagree with it. Maybe, you know, that's outside of our purview based on the bylaws. I don't know. But a normal board would have more involvement with the organization than that.
At the time this was being discussed, though, there's the absence of the board. And we didn't just decide ourselves. We actually went to the governor. We discussed this with the governor, and she gave her imprimatur to do it and then make sure that the board knows about it, which is what we did. So we didn't just do it ourselves. We went to the person that we, at that point in time, were reporting to. It was only implemented a couple of days before.
I'm sure there was more discussion than just 2 days.
No, it's been sitting there for over a year and a half. We just haven't decided to move forward until the governor decided to do the 22%. Then it behooves us to start acting on it.
I don't disagree with it. I'm just saying the way
you know, but it was but it was there before for a long time. We just didn't act on it.
Thank you. Mr. Tidinko.
Hey, thank you, Madam Chair and members. First off, we're representing the small businesses under the Guam Travel and Tourism Association. I have Mr. Bill Knowles, our vice chair. As I said earlier, our chairperson, Mr. Vino Lahan, wasn't able to make it here, and she just asked us to be present to kind of share our thoughts. And number one, we're encouraged really with the discussion, the healthy discussion that's ongoing here. We believe that the new leadership has been installed at the board, and we have the management here, and they're working through these issues, and we want to be able to be supportive of their decisions. We think as the small businesses, we are looking to their leadership to kind of guide us. At the same token, we also are very confident and cannot forget about the seasoned and experienced employees that are there at the Bureau. And don't forget their comments as well as we talk about where we want to take the Bureau. They have many of their employees there, have been there for many, many years, and I think getting some of their input as well, maybe not at this level because maybe this is not the appropriate forum, but at some point, you know, again, I've known many of them. I sat on that board for 12 years, and those guys are dedicated not to the Bureau, but to Guam, right? They're dedicated not to board of directors, but they're dedicated to trying to do their job, and I really, again, I'm working with them every day, as in spite of all the distractions that are ongoing. And all that being said, we also feel that we've got to have the one Guam approach, no matter what, right? It's going to take all of us to make this recovery happen. This situation of trying to resolve the inconsistencies and incongruities between the bylaws and the legislation didn't happen overnight, and the solution is not going to happen overnight. But again, we're going to turn to our leadership that was appointed or elected to the board and the management that's there to be able to come up with a solution to present to the legislators if it's to amend the legislation, or to the membership if it's going to be to amend the bylaws. Again, we are still a membership organization. We want to be part of the solution. And we want to also thank the legislature and the governor for recognizing that tourism is the one that's been hit hardest, and it's taking longer to recover. And now there's some additional help that will come to the small businesses as a result of that, hopefully sooner than later. Because many, we recognize 25 to 30% of the small business, particularly related to tourism, are not there anymore. And many of them are still hanging by a shoestring. And the hardest hit group are the attractions because, right, they need people in there, and local business is not going to sustain them, unlike every other business. And so I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help these folks under these circumstances survive so that we can deliver a great Guam experience and bring back the numbers. When everything was great and it was 1.6 million visitors and stuff, nobody was paying attention to anything but trying to keep their business going. Now that we've had a chance to reset, and again, I applaud both the governor and this board for looking at these incongruencies. What was good 20 years ago is not relevant today, and we just need to evolve as an organization. My other issue is I can't let legal counsel dictate what my business is going to be. I think the policymakers have to make the policy, and then have the legal counsel interpret what is right or wrong. And again, it's up to the policymakers, right? And what is going to happen. So we're not expecting an overnight solution to this issue that is brought forward. But we can't forget, we are competing against the world. This island right now, we're not the only destination, and we're not competing with Hawaii by no means. We're competing with the entire Southeast Asia, where tourists, where people who want to go on trips have a choice, not like before. And so I think as we're going through and trying to address the challenges that are being pointed out by the inconsistencies of the legislation, enabling legislation, and the bylaws, we also have to continue our business. Thank you. We've got the Cocoa Run this weekend, and we have the travel agents that are here. And so that business that is really being run by our staff, right, at the GVB, they're out there working hard. And so we're just saying we want to be supportive because, again, at the end of the day, we want a unified Guam, and we stand behind our Visitors Bureau. But now that they've appointed and elected the Bureau leadership, and they have management here, just don't forget the employees. Make sure we also get their input as well. And we stand ready to help where we can, and we'll continue to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Let me
Tadeko.
just say something publicly. I think if you look at the Latte of the Valley of, what's the name? Valley of the Latte. They're the epitome of what this whole legislation that was created for GVB. That is why when I came, I adopted them as the ideal for what we are trying to do for Guam. And Jerry and I, as soon as that we got in there with it, we went actually and lobbied for the leap for the governor to make sure that they gave that first leap. We needed to make sure that we saved it. I just want to let you know that you are carrying that intent and spirit of the legislation that created GVB. And we want to make sure that you survive.
Yes, Mr. Nault.
Yes. As Mr. Taidinko has said, we are representing small businesses, right? But with small businesses, I believe, these few years we've been doing quite a lot. First, I like to applaud, the management of GVB. These few months, we have seen the upward trends of tourism growing, right? February, the Japanese market was a little over 7,000 people. End of March, I believe it was over 11,000 people, right? So there's growth that's coming. Just recently, it was announced that in May 8th, the restrictions from Japan is going to be lifted, or they're going to change the status of the pandemic, which will make the pandemic more of a common flu, right? And which will allow more travelers to travel. People never understood why Japanese never traveled. I mean, they did travel, but not all the Japanese people. There were some obstacles that they saw is because most of the younger generation only had 2 or less vaccination. In Japan, it was required that you needed 3 vaccinations. If you didn't have 3 vaccinations, you had to get a PCR test. You had to pay for that. If you tested positive, you have to stay another 5-6 days, and you have to pay for your hotel, and you weren't able to go back to work, right? And so what happens is that a lot of the younger generations just decided that it's not time for them to travel. But after May, it will allow them to travel because Japan is basically saying this pandemic is over. Now, with that in mind, I believe the management, the board does see this. I mean, this is not a news that just came overnight, and that we just invited 40-some Japanese tourist agencies to the island and was hosted, and they saw that Guam has been opened. Guam is actually doing better than they expect, right? All these people are going to go back, and they're going to say, hey, Guam is ready. It's just us. It's just us that we haven't been ready. And it was also announced that JADA, who was here a few months ago, is that they just announced that effective May 10th, they are supporting 22 destinations out of Japan, international travel. And out of the 22 destinations, Guam was one of the destinations, right? So we are moving in the right direction. We are coming. And then with the new board on board, we as businesses that work in industry, we kind of see that things are coming back together, right? And it's not how it was a few months back that we used to wonder, what's going on and what happened. We only hope that everybody just works together, right? Because we all just want to work together so that we can all move into one goal. Our goal is to bring back the travelers, bring back our visitors, right? And do it in the right way where that, if the Bureau can do their job, we can do our job, right? And so that's the thing that we have always been worried and we have always been concerned about. And it's not that, someone is doing a wrong thing or so. And if they are, I am sure that the board members and I am sure that the management and, we have, and the legislature, I mean, we can see all this and you guys can fix all that, right? But as businesses, our concern is that everybody, and the motto for GVB now is one Guam, right? And that we need to work as one Guam to make sure that our visitors can grow. Yeah.
Well, so if I may, Madam Chair, I think, Director Jones, you mentioned something earlier about legal counsel's responsibility, and I agree. Legal counsel is there to tell you what you can and what cannot do on a legal perspective. And as this board gets together and looking at Bill, knowing the smaller businesses, I'm hoping that it's not the ideas on how to go after the bylaws right now and changing those bylaws to be conducive to what the enabling legislation is, but to incorporate and bring other stakeholders to this meeting so that when the way I see it, you're going to get together to look at the bylaws, make these changes to the bylaws that doesn't step on the toes of the enabling legislation, and then there would be a separate paper on the side saying, okay, these are our bylaws, but these are some of the things we think the enabling legislation should change. And that goes to the legislature. So we don't take the full amount of bylaws and have to take it to the legislature to change. We just take certain parts that you feel that should be, and that makes it a lot easier for enabling legislations. But you have to adopt your third bylaws and make it conducive. Harmony is what somebody said earlier, bring harmony to it. But I'm asking that this board please consider bringing other stakeholders to the table during this discussion that you will have on the bylaws, including, many of the small businesses that are growing. I mean, they make up 80% of our general fund revenue that comes into this island. 80% are small businesses. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tydegui. Before we close, I'll let the Vice Chair say something.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess it's, as we move on and get some direction of where we're going from here on, it's sounding, well, you got a board in place, you got a chairman in place, you got the management here. It sounds like we're going in that right direction. Am I correct in that? Yeah, am I correct in that? Okay. And is it safe to, is it safe to say at this point that we'll work with the status quo while we also continue to, again, look at bylaws and enabling legislation to do that? And I would suggest that maybe the management and board, of course, definitely with the input of the employees as well, that you take it out to the community and ask the community what they want, and then come to us and make the recommendation. Because I would caution as well, okay, a great big caution in regards to changing enabling legislation right now. A good example of changing enabling legislation, and now we don't know what the hell is going on. Look at DOE at this point, okay? Look at DOE. Don't we wish that the governor still had control? Do we not? Because look at what's going on. We have roundtable after roundtable after roundtable, and I tell you what, I think a year from now, we'll still be dealing about the same situations. And that's what I'm going to caution, because it was a rush to change. It was a rush to change because certain folks weren't liked and decisions weren't liked, and they rushed not only to change that composition or how it was made, but run to change the organic act at that. They changed it. So I caution. I understand there needs to be an upgrade, but it needs to be well thought of. And that's why, again, today, I mean, it's great that we're all here. Again, you have not only your management in place, but your board and your directors in place. You have the small business here, and please include them even more. But take it to the community. Take it to the community. Work with the status quo at this point, and I understand management and board of directors are working hand in hand right now, and so that's great. I hope we don't see you guys anymore.
Director Ho.
Thank you. I've been actually serving GBB for the last 2 years, and I had an opportunity to travel with Governor Carr and met many of the airline service companies. They usually ask the same question: can you please just don't rely on ecotourism? So a lot of Korean people travel to Guam expecting nice sun and nice sky and good ocean so they can have a family time. But we need to have something more than the nature. So if you want to bring more tourists, we need to create some opportunities and reasons for them to come back to Guam. That said, some people can invest big money and build a hotel. Some people can start a restaurant business and some optional tours. The way actually Director Jones mentioned the GITA program, more specifically SSBCI, State Small Business Credit Initiative, there are two prominent beneficiaries of the program, such as AutoSpot and Proa restaurants. So there is a federal program, and also in conjunction with the local banks, they can finance those entrepreneurs and small business when they start something new or try to increase their capacity. There are some programs available. So if you can really work with the local government and other agencies, I believe we can really encourage a young entrepreneur in Guam. And then they'll be okay, because there are some safety nets secured by a local and federal subsidy. So I hope that we can create more opportunities for young people in Guam, especially on small business side. So we will have more reason and appeal, Korean tourists and other countries, reason to come back to Guam. That's what I would like to do. So GBB is not only just talking about marketing, just come to Guam. We will be participating on creating a reason and supporting small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. Director Mesa?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to Senator Lujan and Senator Tello. Again, I'm not new to this tourism industry, and I've served as chairman for the Guam Visitors Bureau, as well as being very active with the membership as well. And I think I commend the management for bringing to our attention some of the deficiencies that we've, overlooked, again, from the members that are very active and are, looking at ways to continue to grow our industry, especially after the situation with the COVID situation. And I'm very excited, though. I'm much more enthused now, going through this process. It's longer than what any of us would have been expected for this particular pandemic to last this long. But I'm very encouraged and excited. I see what the management and the management team, not just here on Guam, but the management team in Japan, and what they were trying to do to keep Guam alive in Japan in this specific market that I'm concerned about, that we're all concerned about. And I'm glad to see that what the plan, which I never did see before what you submitted to this legislature, the details as you mentioned, I'm glad that those things are coming to fruition. And I'm encouraged. I had the pleasure of actually talking to our president at the time, because we never really had a discussion, but now hearing and what you've put out in the paper, as well as what you've committed to do, and I see the passion in it about, growing back and benefiting the island and the local people. As Director Mary said, we're all local people here, and we all want the same thing. But I'm very encouraged, and I look forward to what your plan going into 2024. Of course, some of the details we would hopefully get to see, but I'm further encouraged. And maybe I'm just an optimist myself, but I got to look at being, what can be the best we can be in the next 5 years. And I'm supportive of what the new board is going and what the direction we're looking at too. And I see that the management has done what it needed to do during this pause that we had. And I'm glad that the issues were brought up. It's clear now. We want to be transparent. We want to make sure that we all are working together to make sure that we continue to be successful in our tourism industry. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to further support that, because I think that's really what I meant. I'm so glad Vice Chairman and Senator Lujan said that was really more the clarification of that, because as we all know, right, as everybody is a stakeholder here in Guam, everybody's a beneficiary. And I have to say, it really does touch my heart, the fact that you are adding more cultural programs throughout, because that is what GVB did before, and Jerry was there as GM at that time, and we did, GHRA and GVB worked together to work with all the mayors to create those festivals. Back then, we only had Mango Festival and GMIF. And so through those grants and working with all the mayors, we taught them how to do event management. And that's how we got Dunny Festival, Banana Festival, all of that was all created during that period. So I am very happy to see that. But again, I think these things are all things we're looking forward to working with, I think. But at the same time, we would like to get to that structure. And something that I just need to clarify with regards to Senator Taitigui, she did point out about that liability earlier. And one of the things that was always a concern was that the direction from board members. And I think that the myth out there was that there was undue influence really in the past because more than one board member attended a committee meeting or led a committee. And right now, we only have one board member leading a committee, and so we just voted on that yesterday so that we don't deal with that situation and still following the open government law, but also not putting the employees in a difficult situation between board members and management and where they get their direction from. So I think we're all on the right path, as everybody has mentioned here, but at the same time, I think we still need to go again to the heart of how are we going to ensure what we do forward is really going to address both short and longer term goals. And I think we still have to deal with the fact of both enabling and the bylaws, because we do have that competing interest of a government entity versus a public corporation.
Thank you very much, Director Rhodes. I think we're all very proud of the progress Guam has made for our tourism industry, thanks to all of the hard work of our board today, our predecessors from GVB, everyone who's put in the work over these last several decades. We want to say thank you to them, but we know, I think we're all in agreement here, that the status quo of the Guam Visitors Bureau isn't working in the best interest of Guam. So that's why we're here at the table today. And we will continue to meet. As we said, we're not one and done with this roundtable hearing. We will keep coming back until we get it right. And there's nothing here stopping the Visitors Bureau Board from adopting these amended bylaws to keep you going, to keep you moving in the meantime. But I don't think we should be afraid of change or afraid of the challenge to address the enabling legislation to help us make the Guam Visitors Bureau, or whatever we envision for the future of the visitors industry, the best possible visitors industry we can make it for our people and our visitors. So thank you very much to everyone who's been here today. I hope you're ready to come back to work, and I want to ask you all to do a little homework to bring specific changes that you'd like to see in the enabling legislation for us to discuss in the next roundtable meeting. And Mr. President, I'd like to ask you to bring along your employees as you did in the oversight hearing. If anyone would like to come to the table to discuss, to bring that industry knowledge for us as well, we gladly welcome. Yes, please, everyone is invited, and to the board and to GTTA, please spread the word for us to your colleagues, to your friends in the industry. We want to hear from everyone. All right? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. And with that, this roundtable hearing is adjourned at 4:06 p.m. I'd like to thank my colleagues again, Senator Tello, Vice Chair Lujan, and Senator Kanata for joining us.